2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Well, Blog Talk Radio, I love it. This is the K Factor. For K equals kindness, and the factors are all the things that lead to it. This is your host, Dr. Deb Carlin, and I am really excited to introduce you to my co-host, who is Jonathan Allen of EQ. Jonathan, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Deb.
How are you today?
I'm good. Yeah, really good, actually. Had some good conversations.
Yeah, no kidding. And the inside scoop for our audience is that the conversations is in part the conversation that we had earlier today at 7:30, bright and early, for the Missouri Venture Forum to do their August 2020 first Friday of the month event, which, since we're in 2020, we're not having live events at this point in time. And actually, I don't know if we will in 2020, but you know what? Everybody's getting cozy in our new quarters, which is called the Zoom room. So we were on, we weren't on Blog Talk Radio this morning. We were just in Zoom. But now we're on Blog Talk Radio and Zoom. So people are going to get a double dose of Dr. Deb Carlin and Jonathan Allen. So Jonathan, I love it that you agreed to, in the midst of our friendship and our business association with each other as entrepreneurs, that you agreed to a number of things. One, our ongoing dialogue about entrepreneurship, your business, which is EQ. And I would really like for you to talk to our listening audience about what does EQ mean? What is all that about? And what does it stand for?
Yeah, so conventionally it just stands for Entrepreneur Quarterly,
Okay.
the EQ. And it started life as a magazine,
Okay.
a quarterly magazine. And now it's digital, but I took it over in 2017. So it was founded in St. Louis, and then I acquired it essentially. And the other side of EQ is emotional intelligence, right? And
Yes.
for me, that's a big part of the brand. It's like, entrepreneurship and business needs a degree of emotional intelligence. It's not all, numbers, revenue, profit, investors.
Right.
There's my kind of view on business is that actually a lot of it is about establishing trust, establishing permissions,
Oh my gosh.
like there's tons of other stuff
Yep.
that doesn't fit into a kind of totally, sort of, I hate to say it, but like a macho business narrative. At the end of the day, there's a lot of human interest things happening.
Yeah, you can't fit business. I don't care what anybody says. You can't fit business into the box of accounting, bookkeeping, marketing, and legalistic stuff, because there's human beings involved in it. And it's really funny because in all of our conversations, we have never talked about my orientation as a doctor of psychology to EQ is emotional intelligence. So, the emotional quotient. I think it's great that we finally, after nearly a year, we finally arrived.
It's funny, it's taken a Zoom conversation to bring out these commonalities, which we obviously knew we had, but just had never actually.
It's so funny. It's so funny. So, all right. So it started out as a magazine, as you've said, and then what is it? What is it now? I'm baiting you a little bit because I know some of the answers, but obviously, even just in the first few minutes of our dialogue, we came to an epiphany. So let's have more. So
basically now it's kind of like it's become a established online blog or digital publication, but in the last month I've kind of managed to cross a major milestone, which is I've launched a membership platform.
Okay.
So if you think about social networks are kind of membership platforms for sort of friends and family, and then they kind of expand from there.
Yeah.
EQ is kind of like a membership platform for like local, founders, entrepreneurs, business people, ambitious employees, and all that kind of stuff. And a lot can kind of come from there.
Oh.
So, yeah.
So give some examples, like, okay, let me just go back, and I'm going to tell you what I wrote here. I'm going to look over to the side here for a minute, and I'm going to read to you what I wrote on Blog Talk Radio that got posted out there. It's called EQ plus the K Factor on Freedom Fridays, because the episodes here are called Freedom Fridays with another theme. And I'm saying EQ plus the K Factor on Freedom Fridays, which are all about cooperation. Jonathan Allen and Dr. Deb Carlin come together to share their perspectives about the entrepreneurial journey and the reality of how mindset makes our life what it becomes. Through his EQ, Jonathan shares a wealth of helpful information designed to be highly collaborative and cooperative with others. Dr. Carlin, who leads the Missouri Venture Forum as a lifelong entrepreneur and doctor of psychology, offers her attitudes about this topic, and together they're quite a K-factor duo. So I was inspired to write that because we really are so completely aligned that your mindset, your attitude, your perspective is what your life becomes. And your business and your personal life, I don't care what anybody says about that either. They are intertwined, and there is no separating them.
Yeah, and I think it goes further than that. It's like, a lot of entrepreneurship comes out of being given room in your day job in the early days of your career to try stuff out. And, we need to kind of foster that mindset amongst employers too. But yeah, in my case, if I hadn't had certain employers that, gave me the latitude to try out crazy experiments that might just work, and then they did work, it's kind of kept me happy in my job, and then prepared to adapt to being a founder when I've needed to. So, a couple of times I've flicked between having a normal job and learning on the job, and then establishing a new company, and then doing that for a bit, and flicking between them both.
That's very, very interesting, because my entrepreneurship started as a child. When I was talking to my dad about allowance, and I think he was giving me 10 cents, and I said, 10 cents? What are you talking about? Like a dime? And at the time, I took a couple of weeks of 10 cents, and at the time, the U.S. Mint had a dime that had a man on it and another dime that had a lady on it. So I used to put them in my pocket, and I figured, like mommy and daddy, they would make more kids. So I thought that was a great way to make money.
Yeah.
So I felt really cheated when I went back in my pocket. There was still just 2 dimes. So I went to my dad, and I told him I didn't think that it was fair that I was only getting 10 cents a week. So I understood this idea of a ceiling, like a cap on my financial reality. And I was like 7 at the time, and he said, well, you have to budget in order to get what you want. And I thought, budget? I just ask. I talked to Santa for one. I talked to you and mommy for another. So I actually hired kids in the neighborhood to do some chores for me that my dad wanted me to do. And I paid them like a penny a piece. So I got the work done, and I got to keep 5 cents and pay out 5 cents. And it wasn't bad, but I was inspired to want to get creative and figure out ways to produce money beyond putting coins in my pocket thinking that they would reproduce. And I love the way that you describe entrepreneurship, because really you take all that and you put it together. Look how many child entrepreneurs we see in the world right now.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? And then how locked down do you think people are in their jobs, and how inspired do you think that they are to be entrepreneurs? I'm curious about that.
Well, it's interesting. So you kind of were able to, in in your kind of story, able to work out quickly like the value of money.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, like a big driver was the value of time. And so, and I think I think a lot of people have this experience, and, it's like a generational difference, but it's like my generation watched our parents working too much and all the time, you know? And so I think we watched them and we're like, how do we get our time back? What we want to find out is a way to have more time in the future,
Mm.
because we know the equations like time equals money and all of that. But what you saw when people didn't have any time was it didn't matter how much money they were making, really.
Oh my
Right.
gosh, right.
So certainly for me, um, all of everything I've done is about trying to kind of salvage more time to do other things. And I think that's part of, as the new kind of the workforce these days, I think wants to be able to spend, they're happy to give time in return for money, but
Yeah.
they also just need a bit of creative time on top. And, big companies like Google or whatever work that out. But I think that's just, that's all companies have to kind of acknowledge that future.
Yeah. I agree with that. It was interesting. When I was in graduate school, a really good friend of mine had been working in the think tank with John and Sandy McDonald at McDonnell Douglas. And then they had moved over into the Leadership Center in St. Louis, which is the old Deloge mansion and estate. I mean, just a phenomenal leadership center. And this friend of mine, Charlotte Miller, who actually has since passed away, very sadly, I miss this woman all the time. She was brilliant. And she asked me to come out to the Leadership Center to do some work. And it was really funny because my style of doing work is I want it to be fun. And so I would bring I look like a flight attendant. I would have this bag on rollers, and I would have all these different toys and devices in it. And what was really funny about it was, at first she laughed at me and she said, "Oh, for God's sakes, do you understand we have world leaders who come here? We have, I mean, Peter Senge comes here, all the big names come here. You're going to pull out a Slinky and Crayolas and stuff?" And I said, "Yeah." And they started really adopting this, because what I said to her was, stop and think about it. Cardiovascular disease is one of the most consistent killer of people in our culture. And who does it happen to? It happens to our hardest driving segment of our population, our men, when they're in their 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s. We've got to change the paradigm on stress and mindset, attitude and perspective, in order to get people to feel the freedom and the fun of it. And our theme today, that I bless your heart for bringing it up, not so much the hard driving, head hitting, rams butting their horns at one another, dueling to the death competition, but my goodness, cooperation.
Yeah. And, the interesting thing about time, right, is like everyone's constantly, there's this, especially among startups, there's this whole hustle culture. And it's like, you got to, people are making spreadsheets of like every minute and hour of the day and their entire day. I met someone who was actually counting down every day that he has till the day he died, his estimated, in order to be more productive, to use all of his time more. And I thought, this is such the wrong way of looking at it. It's like, actually, time is a dimension. It's not linear. It's almost quantum. Like, I'm using weird words, but the point is like, put in an hour of really good time and somehow you get back the rest of your day, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's time plus focus can completely sort of change like the reality of like how you spend time, how you use time, how much you can get out of it.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I love the idea. Do you know, oh, golly. It is, I'll think of what the name of the platform is uh, of what the platform is. Mind Valley. Do you know Mind Valley? Mind Valley was started by a really fascinating guy who he talks about mind bending.
Mm,
And so when you take your thoughts and they're so linear and you just have them in this box, you know, it's like if the only thing we could do is live in the square that we're in on a Zoom call, it's fun to be here because it's a way that we can really connect. But if we had to stay here, we never allowed ourselves to walk outside of this, we'd hate it because
yeah.
it's just you so stuck. It's like we want that creative reach. So he talks about mind bending, and I'm thinking about that while you're talking. One of the things I love about you, Jonathan, is your expansiveness of thought. And you so easily reach beyond the paradigm to just push. And it's almost like a spirograph, you know. It's like it's not breaking out of a box. That's just too conservative, you know. It's like the spirograph just goes and grows, and it's lovely and wonderful, and energy then plays off of energy, right?
Mm.
And that's really what we're talking about in terms of cooperation.
Yeah, so so there's two kind of ideas that come up there. One is like um sometimes people say they're stressed, right? They don't have enough time and they can't possibly get anything done
Yeah.
more. But actually, the thing to do in that moment is to commit to another thing. And it's somehow, I don't know how, but when you overcommit at that moment, it forces you to account for time. And then you quickly get rid of the things that are not worth doing. And you do the one thing that was standing in your way. And then when you get that done, you're free again. Suddenly all your time's back. So there's tons of this, mental relationship to time
Mm-hmm.
that needs to be rethought and can be rethought. And part of that as well is like thinking. So in a lot of business culture, especially these days, there's just no room for thinking anymore. It's like
know.
constant complaints about the number of meetings people are having,
Oh
and
my gosh.
and it's like, and there's I would say I've experienced this a few times of like people genuinely believe there's no value in a conversation or thinking about something, but actually thinking, once you think something through properly, you then go and achieve that task in like 3 minutes, actually you can never prove it, but actually thinking drastically reduces the time needed to complete the task. And I find that very frustrating in like startup culture too, and just business in general, and certain kind of business cultures. It's like, actually, if you just let us all think about this for a second and authentically think about it in the way that you're saying, play with slinkies at the same time, do juggle, doodle, whatever, just like open the mind.
Yep.
Actually, everyone can go faster and further, you know?
I do know. I know exactly. You know, one of the things that I really admire, I should say one of the people I really admire is Michael Gelb, Gelb, who has studied Leonardo da Vinci.
Mm.
And he has written volumes about Leonardo da Vinci and the ways in which he always carried a journal with him, some sort of a paper and charcoals, whatever. I mean, this was so long ago.
Mm.
And he would, how during the day when you come up with a bright idea and then later you think, I know I had a really good idea earlier. What was that? He never had to worry about that because he would write it down instantaneously. And then he came up with these exercises that he would do every day where he would say in Italian, and it's beautiful the way that it's written, that he wants you to feel all of your senses and do things to smell, to get the aromas, and to hear differently and dial into different types of hearing things, and touching. And when people forget that, and they get so locked into fast food, hurry up, order it, get it, pay for it, chomp it down, there's no savoring. And the same thing has happened with thoughts.
Yeah.
People we all need to remember that every concept we engage in is generalizable. It becomes habitual, and we habituate from one kind of a habit to another kind of a habit, and then we have a whole lifestyle. The very first thing I do when I do business consulting, Jonathan, I ask people to show me their calendar. And then I ask them, when between the 11 to 12 and the 12 to 1 and the 1 to 2 and the 2 to 3, when did you have time to process what you did in there?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. When did you have time to do the work that you were going to agree to in that meeting? I try to do my work that's assigned in the meeting, but you can't do that with everything. And we really owe it to ourselves, right, to savor those great ideas, those great conversations that take place in meetings. Like I've been thinking since we were together in the Missouri Venture Forum Zoom this morning, 7:30 to 9, about what that experience really was. And then right before we got on here, we talked for about a half hour about that whole conversation.
Yeah, right. And it's like recapping. It's something you do with your, your spouse, or partner. It's like your mum and dad, like your brothers and sisters. It's like actually a lot of your human friendships, you're just recapping, but that's like weirdly satisfying, healthy. Helps you get your kind of whole mind around the problem. It's entertaining,
That's true. I'm going to ask people to get together with me for a recap. Instead of a nightcap, how about a recap? You want to do a recap today?
Yeah.
I love that. That's really true.
And, we've talked about meditation. It's like in meditation, I hate meditation on one level, totally hate it. And I don't do it very often. Okay. But there are moments when I recognize I really have to do it. And I spend the entire 30 minutes just kind of mental chatter. But there's one moment where you do switch off for a second. Like there's no thought going through, and you just hear a bird singing, and for a second your attention is out of your head and genuinely out in the world, listening to what's happening. And if you can get like 7 seconds of that, like you're just instantly recharged. And that's the whole interesting thing, is like the burden of our thoughts kind of feel like it takes the same burden to get rid of, but actually it's more like this kind of instantaneous switch in focus that just completely like pops them like a bubble.
It kind of reminds me when like you go to the emergency department, or you go to your physician because you've got like a really infected splinter in your thumb, and you've been looking at it, and you can't get it, and then it's grown into some ugly thing, and now you're terrified, and you walk in there and you're looking at it, and then you want them to look at it, and you're still looking at it. And you've spent an enormous investment of your emotional energy and time, and they come in and they know exactly what to do. And in my case, it's like I want to tell them what to do because I'm kind of bossy and controlling anyway.
No.
and any clever care provider says to me, hey, look over that way. See that plant out there? And look at the, and I come back and I'm like, how come it's all bandaged up and it's already done?
Yeah.
They freed me from it. And really thank goodness for doing it, because we over focus on something, get lost in it, and then think, well, I'm never getting out of here. So diversion is a beautiful thing. Absolutely.
And that kind of brings me on to cooperation, right? So one of the things is in business is like everyone understands the need to cooperate in theory, we all
In
know that
theory.
we have to work together. But quite quickly, people can't cooperate because they end up sort of territorial about something.
Mm.
And they end up like over focused on their territory. And then everyone sort of gets alienated in the conversation. Whereas if you can actually, accept that if you shift your attention for a second, you'll always be able to come back, you'll always be able to, return to your default position of worrying, essentially. But if you can kind of move your attention way to the other party and look at sort of, and both kind of parties, like look at like what are the difficult things. Actually, you can kind of tackle the difficult things together. And that's kind of a big thing for me recently around cooperation as well. It's like, actually, when you're doing it properly, all of you can go through a period that you're having a bad experience and you're thinking, why am I doing this? And why did I make this promise? And are they even doing anything? And all of that stuff. But when you're through it, you can be the other side of it, just absolutely in awe of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And thankful that you went the distance,
Mm-hmm.
and you get a certain kind of thankfulness that is spiritual. It's like you think, what if I hadn't have pushed through my negative thoughts, to get to this moment,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking of a moment specifically, which was when we did our conference last year, the EQ Leadership Labs.
Yeah.
Everyone cooperated. We had 7 different teams cooperate to do it.
Really?
Yeah, and there were moments where we had to be pretty kind of stern with each other, and we couldn't just be nice and smiley about it all the time. Things had to get done.
Right.
Remember, at the after party, like one of the partners in it was just so happy that he burst into tears. And he was just like, can't believe what we achieved.
Because it really worked to be cooperative.
And it was the end result was so much bigger than any of us could imagine. There was this moment of pure creation kind of happened.
So why do you think that we suffer so much from this competitiveness? Because I have noticed that my entire life, and believe it or not, I'm not competitive. I really, if we can't cooperate, then I just either dig my heels in and say, okay, don't cooperate, but I'm not changing my mind. But I don't want to go for the throat to win something. I just can't stand it.
Well, I think it's, a lot of things, but I definitely think, I almost want to say, we're taught a certain view of our own economic systems, right?
Yeah.
We're taught that, it's a winner takes all economy, it's dog eat dog world. The early bird catches the worm. We're taught a lot of these kind of sort of weird, they're not weird ideas, like they're truisms, but they're also just like one way of looking at things, and particularly in like, say, capitalism, we're always taught like that it's about capital is just about having wealth, the haves and the have nots. But actually, if you look at proper the proper kind of ideology of it, it's actually also saying that if we can use capital, we can create more capital, and we can just.
Yes, that's how I was raised.
And
And
that's actually, yeah, that's actually like what it's meant to be about.
yeah,
But somewhere along the way, we've like lost this idea.
so when I was taught the early bird catches the worm, it was because my parents were saying, we're up catching the worms, come and join us.
Right.
So it was like everybody got up early. I mean, seriously. And it was never the haves and the have-nots. So I grew up with a nice amount of abundance in a lovely middle-class family. And my parents were very creative with how it was that they generated money, and they loved what they did. And my understanding was that we should all aspire to have goodness and to have clothes and warmth and a nice home and choices that came with what capitalism afforded you. I learned that capitalism actually in the American way was about freedom of thought.
Yeah.
And it was about the freedom that you had from not being told what to think. I remember thinking that if you came from a communist country that they told you what to think. And I thought, well, how is that possible? And so it never occurred to me. Now, when I went to gym class and somebody wanted me to play softball, I know that one team was going to win and one team was going to lose. So I didn't actually want to play. and to play tennis, I just wanted to volley the ball because I thought it was fun to hit it back and forth and back and forth.
Right. Okay, so that's an interesting thing, and I think this is one of the cool things about globalization. So yeah, in Western video games tend to be competitive, but Japanese video games, like Nintendo and stuff, tend to be cooperative.
Really?
So yeah, so there's kind of like there's like a growing movement for and it's been happening over like 30-40 years, but kind of, yeah, different cultures bring different sort of ideologies into society through different vehicles. And another thing is like there's all these games like role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and things like that for ages were seen as super geeky and the reserve of nerds, and no one could possibly want to do that. But now that's all super normal and is cool to do. And one of the things that people don't realize is all of those were cooperative games. Everyone had to work together in those games.
It's really funny. I have never, ever played a video game.
You might just have one of those hyper addictive personalities and you just instinctively stay away from it.
It's just, well, it's like that. No, they scared me because I thought, when I heard Dungeons and Dragons, and I was like, dungeons? I don't even want to go to a basement. And dragons, I don't want hot breath coming after me, and so it didn't appeal to me. And then who was I talking to? Somebody was just telling me that I was just talking to that they love in their, I know who it was. It was Dr. Charlie Cartwright this morning, and the episode that he and I did together. And he said in his free time that he plays video games. And I was like, video games?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? You play video games? What are you doing in there? And he was talking about the relaxation of it and the way in which it really freed his mind from everything else. So it was another meditative state.
I agree with that. I play video games. I've got I've got like one kind of particular thing that I want to write about regarding video games, about how it got me through, it can get you through difficult times. And I think one of the good things about video games is it's systems. So it allows you to like play with the system. And I think people worry that people who play games don't recognize that it's a closed system, but actually they do. And that's the meditation, being able to just watch how this closed loop functions,
Really?
something you can't do in your own normal life. It's the systems of your day-to-day life are much more complex.
Yeah,
But
really.
that's why it's relaxing.
So tell me, in our entrepreneurial community, what is it that we can do, Jonathan, to really get cooperative? Because the thing I notice is in a lot of communities around the country, there will be these, they call them ecosystems, which doesn't make any sense to me. The ecosystem is about nature and stuff. I understand it's an analogy, but there's an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and it so often looks like there's a lot of competition for turf, for the real estate, the offices, the event space, the dollars, the money, the grants, the investors. What do we do about all
Well,
that?
that's a really, what you actually make a very interesting point there. That is exactly the root of the issue. The whole analogy of ecosystem should totally work for cooperation. We're using that word to show that, a little change here causes big changes here, and
Yeah,
that all of these things are essentially operating in harmony.
yeah,
But you're right. I think what happens is there becomes, the ecosystem starts off with the greatest intentions, but then kind of winners emerge or seem to emerge. And then people sort of default to an old way of doing business. And particularly one that I kind of resent, for want of a better word, is like king making. There's this perception that the media is a king-making organization and it should anoint the winners,
oh,
and things like that. And on some level, media does do that in a conventional sense. But, that's kind of not the right way to do it when we're talking about something as kind of fragile as a new business ecosystem.
yeah,
You don't want to be constantly announcing the winners of this thing,
right,
because it's a very long-term evolution that we're kind of going for. And actually what we want to do is support all the seedling organizations, all the people who are going to try and fail like 3 or 4 times before they succeed.
right.
We need to support them. But traditional economics doesn't really allow that, right? It's like we, most people want to read about the winners. They never want to read about the losers.
Right.
But that's what we have to do with community, is actually say there's all this dignity in losing, in trying. And that's not to use that whole like snowflake thing that people, that's not a award for second best or anything like that. It's like there's genuinely a need to, in order to kind of, pivot to the new way that economies are going to be organized,
You
you
know,
need a bunch of people to take risks and mess it up.
yeah, one of the things I used to do was I was invited in by these two wonderful gentlemen, Mason Dukacek and Bill Pernat. Mason Dukacek had been in human resources and was always an entrepreneurial kind of a guy. And he was going around before the crash, and he was noticing that his customers were, he was selling them assessments and consulting services, and like he'd come down the hallway to the companies that he'd gone into, and he'd be looking for people that he had been making deals with in HR, and the lights were off and they were gone, or 4 people down the hallway were gone because people were companies were downsizing because we were going through a financial crash. And he created this theme called Reverse the Risk, and
Okay.
he wanted to figure out, hey, look, you still need what I do, but I'm going to give it to you right now. And I'm not going to ever bill you for it, but I'm going to reverse the risk. I'm taking on the risk. I'm investing in our relationship and the ongoing goodness of the quality of what I offer you. And when times recover, you're going to remember me because we've been working together the whole time. So he reversed the risk, and it went really well. Well, then
Mm.
Bill Purnett was a salesman, and he had a very unique humanitarian way of doing his deals and closing, and he was never a cutthroat kind of a guy. Now he probably sometimes he says, "Oh yes, I was," but I know him, and I don't know him that way. Well, they put together E for E, Experts for Entrepreneurs, and I have to tell you, this was a beautiful model of entrepreneurs coming together to hear one another's stories and to offer one another services. And you know what was beautiful about it, Jonathan? And I became their spokesperson. They invited me and they decided they liked my mojo, so, and my skill set and credentials and all that. We came together and we taught each other, but we also held one another's hands. And we were not afraid to say it was a very safe environment. There was no competition. Everybody was there to support one another as they launched their business. And, you know, there's a little difference between a self-employed person and a true entrepreneur who's trying to invent something. But the beauty was that it was small business owners, solopreneurs, and entrepreneurs coming together. And really, I mean, there were people who'd sit in there, you know, they were like crying, you know, I can't sell anything. I got this thing, I can't sell it. What do I do? We talk.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there is a difference. I would say they're the same. You know, I think small business will hire more people than corporate America. You know,
Yes.
in a way, you know, one of the things about networks is they radiate all of the risk to the edges of the network.
Oh,
And yeah, so if you, that's the phenomenon of networks.
say more.
Yeah, so small businesses are the ones that are not treated like entrepreneurs, and yet they're hiring more people in the nation than all of the corporations with less money, and actually they're the people who are taking all the risks on the most fragile asset, which is like human capital. You know, they're the ones that are betting on people to help them, and all those small businesses who hire people and then maybe let go of them after 3 months because they can't afford to keep the money, they're still qualifying all of these workers and keeping the economy really going, more than all of these huge corporations. And that's all because of the way risk radiates out to the edges of the network. And so actually we should totally be calling small businesses entrepreneurs, because entrepreneur does carry that implication of risk and risk taker and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the in a way that's one of the kind of sad truths. We don't honor our solopreneurs, our independent workers, all the people who are like, I'm going to make it work for me, and then I'll try and make it work for other people.
You are really right about that. That is so fascinating.
That's you know, I mean, all the startups is exciting and fun and glamorous and sexy, and that's where the kind of, you can imagine the future.
Yeah.
But you can't actually imagine the future without small businesses. The future without small businesses is authoritarianism by another name, you know, in many ways. I mean, that might be a little bit extreme, but you know, that's going to be that's another thing that's coming out of this stuff now, is like, we do have to support restaurants. You do have to like,
Oh my gosh.
you know, those people, you know, all those people hire people, and if they only hire them for 3 months or whatever, that they then put a job on that person's resume, which makes it possible for them to get a proper salaried job. You know, there needs to be a lot more done, I think, for small businesses in general, you know.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the early distribution of money ferreted out by the mandate of the government to help businesses, supposedly small businesses, through, you know, everything that we've been through in 2020, really demonstrated when money was given to
Yeah.
who's got all the money. So thank you, Harvard. I think that you gave the money back.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, and then there's this list of places that said, okay, we applied, we got humiliated, we gave the money back, or whatever, however that all played out.
Mm.
Yeah, because then there's all the little people out here, you know, me included. I mean, I didn't get any of that money. I
Yeah.
didn't go after it, but I didn't think that I could. So I just thought, well, I really got to hustle up and, you know, really get through this and get more creative about the ways in which I see these needs. And so I need to figure out ways to really fill them. You know, I wonder about that too, Jonathan, in terms of competitions for grant money. I
Yeah.
love going into the St. Louis entrepreneurial community and hearing like the grant winners. You've been a grant winner from Arch Grants. I went to my first Arch Grants gala this last year and heard Bob Chapman, you know, talk and looked at all those winners. And I had interviewed all those people uh, for Missouri Venture Forum to share their stories, to ask them to come in and tell their stories.
Yeah.
And they're beautiful and they inspire others. And then it seems like, and you can really speak to this, so please help me with this, having been an Arch Grant winner, there's layers of grants that you can go and apply for and win, and kind of guarantees about what you can get at various levels, so that you can go in where you're really going to be in the right place, because they're looking for something that you're meeting the demographic of in terms of your business type. But that kind of competition, quite frankly, I mean, sort of embarrassing to say. I mean, I'm a grown-up person. I've met with success, and then I've fallen flat on my face or my butt, whatever, but on my pocketbook. And I'm scared of those kinds of competitions, because I look at the other people and I think, boy, they have really got their act together,
Oh yeah, totally.
you know?
Yeah.
So what's it, I mean, is it healthy? And speak to that as a grant winner. And didn't you just go through it again?
Yeah, I've applied again, yeah, for EQ, yeah.
So
And
talk
so
about it.
yeah, I mean, you know, I would say that the thing, you know, the competition side of it in a lot of ways is really marketing for St. Louis.
Yeah.
It's it harkens back to the days of the Spirit of St. Louis Prize, you
Okay.
know, of flying someone a manned flight across the Atlantic.
Oh, yeah.
And but it's quite a good, I think it's quite a good way of kind of getting the word out and putting a deadline on it
Oh,
and
okay.
those things. So I think it's a useful structure to get the message across that, you know, I think Arch Grants gets the message across. St. Louis is open for business. It's looking for people to move here. You know, it's interested in innovation. I mean, these are quite big messages that are difficult to get out there, you know, in the media and things like that. But just holding a competition kind of gets that idea out there. And if you think about, like, you know, this week, or I think it's around this time, or very soon, they've already organized the first like manned space flight with Virgin Galactic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's kind of, I think there was an update about it recently. Anyway, that was done through a competition, you know, and that was actually also done inspired by the Spirit of St. Louis competition. So, you know, Richard Branson and Virgin Galactic said, we want to do the first manned mission, you know, passenger flight to space. And that just got a lot of people involved. And I think everyone knows, a lot of the people who participate recognize that it's not about just winning the money. Actually, what what you really get is the media moment and the network and this kind of window of glory that connects you to a lot of people. And Arch Grants particularly does that very well. And then the other side of the competition, having just done it this time round again, it's quite good for just clarifying my thoughts. I mean, on some level, even if it goes nowhere, the exercise of trying to explain what I was doing was vaguely useful.
And so I'm really glad to hear that. And so the categories are really broad and open for what it is that you can enter into.
Yeah, you can go for anything. In the case of Arch Grants specifically, they want you to relocate half of your founding team or your entire founding team to St. Louis for a minimum of 1 year.
Yeah.
And I would say that Arch Grants particularly is very good at saying, we like the business, but we also want to know, what are you going to bring to St. Louis? Like, how are you going to contribute? And I do think that they have an ear for that. And I've actually advised about 4 companies on their grants, and they've all won. And
Really?
the one, I'll boast about that. But the one thing that I said to them is, honestly, I don't even really care whether any of your business makes sense, as long as you've got a clear mission that you're going to do in St. Louis, you know?
Oh, that's so neat.
Yeah. So I do really rate Arch Grants. I mean, I will say that, you know, as an economic development policy, there's a lot of criticism in the rest of the world for these kind of this policy, for that way of doing it.
Yeah.
Because, for instance, you get what are called accelerator hoppers. So you get these startups that are just hopping around every accelerator program to collect, you know, hoovering up all the free money.
Really?
It happens, but, you know, I still think that that's a pretty mean characterization, you know? Like, I would say that you could argue that this is happening, but it's certainly not happening. It's a bit of a mean, it's a bit of a kind of mean characterization at the end of the day. I mean, that's one way of interpreting the story. The other way you could interpret it is like, it's a promising company and everyone agrees, and that's why they keep winning awards.
Okay, fabulous. Now, what you came and did the first time you won and what you did the second time, are they different?
Yeah. So I came with my digital marketing company the first time.
Yeah.
So my message to St. Louis then was, you know, we're a strong marketing company. We also are a startup ourselves. And we're really good around mission-driven storytelling. That was our big thing. And, you know, St. Louis is an old PR town that has a lot of kind of old media.
Right.
And it makes sense for it to nurture new media talent, you know, in the city.
Okay.
And then obviously everything else is on the strength of the business itself, and it is a strong business. You know?
So what do you see? And you won in 2016, right?
Yeah.
So what do you see that the impact has been with you being in St. Louis? Because you've got a lot bigger footprint than I think what people realize.
Yeah. I mean, well, so, you know, with that company, I think winning the grant gave us an instant community as soon as we arrived. That is a huge thing, you know.
Okay.
You rarely land in a city and, you know, the kind of top brass of the city is kind of opening up its little black book and making introductions for you.
Yeah.
But that's what Arch Grants did. So that set me up with meetings with Stiefel, Green Street, Emerson, like big names in St. Louis.
Wow.
And for us, what was really impressive about that was, you know, we were in New York and we were really good at what we did. but it was hard to break into that enterprise level
Yeah.
of really big name clients. But in St. Louis, we were new and different and exotic, and you know, these enterprise companies wanted kind of rare and interesting talent and opportunities. So we actually won, you know, investment banks here, real estate firms, whole categories. We won like the top companies here, which meant that we then could boost our name in New York and the rest of the world. And in the end, we got the United Nations as a client.
Really?
Yeah. And I say that's because we won Stiefel in St. Louis, which then won us Deloitte in another place. And once we had those two, it was easy to say we can work for the United Nations.
Well, that's awesome. Do you still have business with those entities, or has your business changed so much that you have a different focus?
Yeah, so that company still has strong relationships and does business with all those organizations. But I've stepped aside from that, and I'm now doing a new company, which is EQ. So I'm not focused on the same things. I'm trying something different.
So, what do you think? We've got about 3 minutes left.
Okay.
This hour has flown by, hasn't
Yeah.
it? Two chatties. What is your K factor mindset, entrepreneurial EQ, summation, wish and desire for us?
Well, I guess one of the biggest things that happened to me in St. Louis was last year I held a conference, and the keynote speaker was Tim Sanders, who wrote Love is the Killer App.
Yeah.
He's the book that I read in 2007 or it was around 2005 when I first got into entrepreneurship in London. And his whole idea was just constantly network people. Don't just connect everyone all the time, and don't try to own the relationships. Just let them bloom on their own. And that has really worked for me, and it set me up in London, it set me up in New York, it then set me up in St. Louis. And I think that's what I want for you and me with EQ and Missouri Venture Forum, is just to be those super connectors.
Yeah.
Where we then go, all right, you go and take it forward. We're not going to worry about what you're doing. We're just glad we put the right two people together.
Oh, I love that. That goes back to our morning meeting with the Missouri Venture Forum, talking about the ways in which we're just professional matchmakers. You know,
Right.
Let's get everybody together. I mean, if you can have love affairs in business, you can get life ready anywhere. You know, and have it be really satisfying. This is great. So we're going to be doing this on Fridays. This is our new gig on Fridays.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I love it. And so, to our audience, here's what I'd like to say. I created the series because I was looking for a way to have uplift for all of us here in 2020, which is a global time of not quite so pretty, and certainly nationally, but here at the K Factor, bring all the kindness factors together and make splendid things happen. So, Jonathan Allen, thank you so much for being here today and agreeing to be my co-host.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Deb. And yeah, this is great.
Great. All right. So from your host here, this is Dr. Deb Carlin signing off, saying I hope you have a beautiful rest of the day, a lovely weekend. Take care of all your relationships. Take care of your mind, your body, and your soul. Peace out.
Peace.